Just how expensive is it to get to the moon? When it comes to space exploration, competition thins out. Only 4 nations on our planet have real capabilities for lunar ambitions. Getting to the moon is extremely expensive. The Apollo 11 mission, which successfully landed the first humans on the moon in July 1969, had a total cost of about $25.4 billion at the time. Adjusted for inflation, this amount is approximately $217 billion in today's money. To put that in perspective, it's roughly what the entire US spent on electricity in 2023. Despite technological advancements and private sector involvement reducing some costs, the absolute costs remain very high. The United States, the European Union, China, and India all aim to land astronauts on the moon by 2025. So just how expensive will it be to fulfill these ambitions? Let us illustrate the substantial financial commitments each region makes towards space exploration, highlighting both the absolute costs and their relative economic impact. In 2023, the US government allocated around $73.2 billion to its space programs, making NASA the world's highest spender by a significant margin. This represents about 0.24% of the US GDP. China's space budget, while less transparent, exceeded $14 billion, accounting for between 0.5 and 1% of their GDP. This figure is expected to rise as their space program expands. The European Space Agency, funded by its member states, had an estimated budget of $7.08 billion, which is approximately 0.04% of the EU's GDP. Despite its relatively small budget, the EU contributes through a collaborative approach, pooling resources and expertise from 22 member states. Meanwhile, India, known for its cost-effective space missions, has a modest annual space budget of around $1.5 billion. This constitutes about 0.04% of India's GDP, demonstrating their ability to achieve significant results with a tiny budget. How do these budgets support moon missions? Let us take NASA's ambitious Artemis program, aiming to return astronauts to the moon by 2026 as an example. The Artemis 3 mission is set to be one of the most exciting adventures of our time, taking astronauts to the moon using NASA's Orion spacecraft and SpaceX's human landing system, Starship HLS. Under NASA's current plan, the 4-person crew of Artemis 3 will launch from Kennedy Space Center aboard the SLS moon rocket and the Orion spacecraft. The Orion capsule will transport the astronauts to lunar orbit, where Starship HLS will be waiting. The 15-story tall Starship HLS will take off on top of SpaceX's new Super Heavy booster, an enormous rocket SpaceX is designing to be recoverable and reusable. Once in low Earth orbit, the Starship will be refueled with methane and liquid oxygen by a series of tanker vehicles. In lunar orbit, the Orion spacecraft will dock with the Starship lander. 2 astronauts will transfer to the Starship and descend to a landing site near the moon's south pole, while the other 2 remain in the Orion capsule. After spending several days on the lunar surface and conducting multiple spacewalks, the Starship will return to lunar orbit to reunite with Orion, which will then bring the crew back to Earth. NASA's Inspector General has estimated that the Artemis program, including the SLS rocket, Orion spacecraft, related infrastructure, and development and operational expenses, will cost approximately $93 billion through 2025. Each of the first 4 Artemis missions is projected to cost about $4.1 billion per flight. While these projections are promising, the actual costs and outcomes remain to be seen. To grasp the scale of $93 billion, let's compare it with familiar figures on Earth. Imagine the total electricity expenditure across Africa in 2023, estimated at around $70 billion. That's less than the Artemis program budget. Next, think about the World Bank's $93 billion IDA replenishment package, designed to help the world's poorest countries tackle crises and build resilience. Similarly, in 2022, developed countries provided $91.6 billion in climate finance to combat climate change globally. Both these programs are equal to the Artemis program budget, And finally, we tried to estimate the global expenditure on milk for children for a global child population of about 2.2 billion. Assuming an average annual milk consumption per child of 60 litres at an average cost of milk per litre of 50 cents, we arrive at a figure of 66 billion. These comparisons highlight just how monumental the investment in lunar missions is, standing alongside other major global financial commitments. Only a handful of nations possess the capacity to dedicate this amount of money to a space program that may potentially lead to nothing. Rockets can explode, equipment can malfunction, missions can fail. The challenges that are bigger than any one nation can deal with on its own will require cooperation. But the fact remains that it is hugely expensive to go to the moon. So why are these nations still spending all this money to go there? What kind of return on investment are these nations hoping for? In our next videos, we look into exactly these questions. The figures are staggering. Thank you for watching Prime Think. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.